Well, this is going to be, I'm going to try to do 1, 2, or 3 midweek updates. I'm going to try to limit them to one particular topic. This one will be related to making a list, and you'll see what that's about in just a couple of moments. But the other ones will be probably Russia, Ukraine, and a little bit about Israel and the Middle East. And some of them will be things that I'm going to do in a little bit more detail on Sunday. Right now, I don't think I'm going to talk until Sunday about the Amnesty International report that called Israel an apartheid state and really called for the dismantling of the Jewish state of Israel. Until Sunday, there's still some things I'm reading and researching about that. So right now I'm going to do a relatively short update for me on making a list. And you'll see, and mostly this relates to the dispute that's going on with Canada and the truckers, but also how it's bleeding over into the United States. And I want you to see the common theme of the narrative and the language that's used in these things. So just a reminder, here are some of the other channels that we're on. We talk every week about the convergence of events. Things seem to be happening much more quickly. And so that's part of the grid that I use. I call it the Prophecy ACLU: acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. Acceleration, things are going to be happening more quickly. Convergence, a lot of things that are related to Bible prophecy are all going to be happening at the same time. There's a logistics aspect, though, as things have to be put in place for the prophecies to be fulfilled. But we can see that some of these things happen more quickly now with the development of different technologies in warfare, artificial intelligence, computers, that type of thing. So what we might have thought would have taken many years to come together, I think it can come together in a more compressed time. But there are still some other things that might need to be, that might need some time or some real assistance to get them done. And then understanding, and that's based on this verse in Daniel, both in Daniel 11 and 12, that, as it says in Daniel chapter 12, verse 9, and he said, "Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand." So we want to be those people that are in the book, going back and forth through the book, through the prophecies, to help us have an understanding of the framework of Bible prophecy and the world in which these things will unfold. And we need to be humble enough to admit that, well, maybe we just didn't have that particular aspect right, because these things are going to be coming at us. And it says that until the time of the end, the book is sealed up. But in that time of the end, people will understand. So I think we're going to have better understanding as we get closer. It's just like the example that I use of the eye chart. When you get closer to that eye chart, even as a nearsighted person like me, you have a better vision as to what's going on. So I want to just talk in this update about what's going on in Canada. Of course, we know there's been, for the last 10, 11, 12 days, there has been this protest of Canadian truckers. They have come to, I would say easily by the hundreds or thousands, have come to Ottawa to protest the lockdowns. Now, the protest has spread to other parts of Canada and other countries in the world. I see some protests going on in New Zealand. There's talk about something like this happening in the United States. And this is where it kind of fits into the narrative that's being developed about anybody who opposes anything that the government does. And we know that there's this coming government, and this government will be from all things I read in Scripture, Revelation 13 and elsewhere in the chapters in Daniel, this coming world leader will be a dictator, a tyrant, but he'll appeal to people because he'll give them what they want. And right now we're very, very divided. Even if you step outside of the church for a little bit, we're divided on everything. in the church we're divided on everything. And I'll have some more comments about that on Sunday, because it seems that at the end, the church should be more unified, the true remnant church. But I still see a lot of division, and I'm concerned about that. And I hope I don't contribute to that. I really don't, because I want to be, at Fellowship Bible Chapel, where I teach, and I'm an elder, that we want to be on the right track. So, anyway, that we live at this very, very strange time of history. So what's going on is this narrative that's being built. So look at some of the headlines as Ottawa police to implement hardline approach towards demonstrators. They brought in extra cops. They say, we can't handle it. The cops are destroying downtown. And I see people that have been in lockdowns because of Charlie Vector 019er, as they've been mandated by the government. Businesses have been destroyed. Thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses in Canada, in the U.S., in Australia, in New Zealand, all over the place have been destroyed by these government lockdowns. And so the people who've been in lockdowns off and on for 2 years, who have mandates regarding masks and that sort of thing, the truckers have come and disrupted, and let's admit it, it's very disruptive what they're doing. They are blocking downtown, and I'll show you some more. Well, I can show you even more of what's going on. Here's some pictures from the Detroit newspapers today about the fact that there's a blockade at the border, and this is causing problems. And I'll talk more about that at the moment, because it's going to lead to more supply chain disruption. So we have to admit that the truckers are being disruptive. But the people whose lives have been disrupted now are pouring out all of their anger on the truckers. And I'm not sure that that's fair. Certainly Canada has a bill of rights under their governing documents that allows protest. But you can see how the narrative has been changing. And the police have really cracked down on this. This is the one thing that's been disturbing to me, as people have protested, and mostly peacefully. I mean, sure, look, there are probably a couple outliers who've done something, but that doesn't mean everybody who's protesting is a bad guy, or somebody wants to, they want what they think is their right to have freedom. And so they're protesting. But here's a picture. This is from Ottawa, and I've got videos, and people are sending me videos and stories about what the cops have done. Is they have gone in some places in downtown Ottawa, and taken the fuel cans that the truckers have. The truckers are essentially living in their trucks. Some of them have brought their children in, which causes other problems. Some of the narrative is, well, we don't want to go in and do anything with the truckers because they brought their children. But then there are people saying, well, we need to get the child welfare people involved, because it's not fair that they just shouldn't be doing this. So the police have come in and taken the truckers' fuel and water in the hope that they will, you may not know this depending on where you live, but it's very cold in Ottawa, Canada, and all over Canada at this time of year. It's winter. And so the truckers need the fuel to run their trucks, to run their heaters. And the police have come and taken thousands of liters of fuel. And they've also said anybody brings any water, food, fuel, or anything, they're going to be arrested. Now, I don't know that it's against the law to have a fuel can in Canada. And one of the things I even saw a policeman saying, well, see, they're making a bomb. Look at how they have gathered all this fuel together. Well, that's not how the truckers had it stored. This is how the police have it stored in the back of a truck. But they're blaming it on the truckers. And this is part of the narrative that's going on. Look at this article in the Globe and Mail a couple days ago from a guy named Mark Carney. He's a former governor of the Bank of Canada. He is being touted in some circles as a future prime minister. Listen to what he says. It's time to end the sedition in Ottawa. And so you see the narrative that had sedition in the United States from last January of 2021 is now being put here onto these truckers who are protesting. And I don't think there's any proof that they are stealing from people. They may have yelled at people, hey, take off that mask, which, by the way, a lot of governors in the United States are saying you can do now. So this is a time of great confusion among people, and they have created this narrative and that has been totally bought by some people. And I just want you to see how this plays into Bible prophecy, in that I think everybody has to admit this is unlike anything that we've seen in our lifetimes. Some people that are older may have seen it back in the 1930s in other countries. But how quickly it went over this Charlie Vector thing, Charlie Vector 019er. It's crazy. But listen to what Mark Carney says in his article. In our capital city, many people have been terrorized for more than a week. Women fleeing abuse have been harassed. Many elderly have been too afraid to venture outside their homes for groceries. Families have been deprived of sleep for days on end by the constant barrage of 100 decibel noise. And by the way, there was a lawsuit filed against the truckers, and a judge said, okay, don't blow your horns. That's all he said, though. He didn't say anything about you have to stop protesting or anything like that. So they did tell him to stop blowing their horns, and I saw truckers posting videos saying, don't blow your horns, guys. People don't like that. This is Mark Carney, control over the city's downtown core, which includes the parliamentary precinct, was ceded by the police and taken over by what the chair of Police Services Board describes as, guess what term they use, insurrection. Canadians can be forgiven if they thought this would never happen in Ottawa. The goals of the leadership of the so-called Freedom Convoy were clear from the start: to remove from power the government that Canadians elected less than 6 months ago. It's a coalition government, and not a majority of the people in Canada voted for Justin Trudeau's party. I think they got about 32% of the vote of the seats in the parliament and had to form a coalition. So, but you see how the narrative changed. The facts don't matter to Mark Carney. And it's clear what he is. It's clear what he is. He's a globalist. Look at this. The goals of the leadership of the so-called Freedom Convoy were clear from the start: to remove from power the government that Canadians elected. Their blatant treachery was dismissed as comic, which meant many didn't take them as seriously as they should have. Certainly not our public safety authorities. But he says here, it's like, but now in its second week, no one should have any doubt. This is sedition. That's a word I never thought I would use in Canada. It means incitement of resistance to or insurrection against lawful authority. From now on, those who are occupying the downtown of our country's capital should be in no doubt. They are no longer simply advocating a different strategy to end COVID-19. They are not patriots. This is not about restoring freedom, but beginning anarchy. This isn't getting carried away at a rally. It's not a rush of blood to the head. It's deliberate and calculated. And because of that, they must know that from now on, there will be consequences for their actions. So this guy advocates it. Now, in the National Post column this morning, it says this isn't sedition just because Mark Carney thinks so, but this author says, well, but they still should go away. But he says the goal doesn't appear to be a violent takeover. So this is the narrative. This is happening in the United States. I'm sure it's happening in Australia. It's happening in New Zealand. It's happening in places in Europe. This morning's front page of the National Post in Canada had this: Prime Minister Trudeau, how far are you prepared to go to maintain order? And then they have a picture of him speaking from a house behind a door. Just watch me. Funny, but sadly true. He has appeared in Parliament. I'll have some clips of what he and some others said in response to him on Sunday, because Trudeau is sort of at the center of this narrative to take over everything by the globalists. I just don't think there's any question that this is happening now. It's interesting. Back in September of 2017, our good friend Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum was at Harvard Kennedy School of Government, September 20, 2017. And I think that's David Gergen was asking him some questions about what he was there to talk to young leaders. That was the purpose of the forum. So he came in, he spoke, and this is what he had to say when he was asked. Here's a question from Gergen and Klaus Schwab's response. Listen to who he identifies in this talk from 2017.
When you brought the Young Global Leaders Program here for executive education and the Schwab Fellows, but there are two countries in the world now in which the young global leaders... When you brought the Young Global Leaders Program here for executive education and the Schwab Fellows, but there are two countries in the world now in which the young global leaders have emerged. Tell us just a bit about that, in terms of the governance.
Yes, actually, this notion to integrate young leaders is part of the World Economic Forum since many years. And I have to say, when I mention now names like Ms. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Argentina, and it's so in France now. Mm-hmm. I'm with the president, with a young global leader, but what is important for me is those young global leaders have an opportunity to come here. Right. And we have established a course now since several years. And I think this cooperation has a tremendous impact, because being here for a week really creates a strong community. And we, in addition to the young global leaders, we have now the global shapers in 450 cities around the world. What is astonishing is to see how those young people really have a different mindset, and I have great admiration, because when I have a group of global shapers in the room and then ask them...
So there you go. There's Klaus
Schwab.
Schwab. This is sort of buttresses an article that I've referenced a number of times by Michael Ward at the Rare Foundation, written back in November, exposed Klaus Schwab's School for COVID Dictators Plan for the Great Reset. And this has been planned. This is what Schwab has wanted to do, and he's been very successful at doing this. Here are some of the global leaders that have graduated from his Global Leadership School. Gavin Newsom, 2005. Pete Buttigieg, 2019. Emmanuel Macron, 2017. Angela Merkel, 1992. Even captains of industry, Jeff Bezos from Amazon in 1998. And then, of course, the ubiquitous Bill Gates. And note that the Kennedy School of Government is one of the places where they do this. I was just watching Schwab at the Kennedy School in 2021. In the school's early years, this is Schwab's School of Young Global Leaders. It involved members of each class meeting several times over the course of a year, including a 10-day executive training session where? At the Harvard Business School, the same place that we just got this clip from. But understand that the narrative is very important. This is one of the most troubling things I've seen in some time. This is a bulletin that was issued by the National Terrorism Advisory System of the Department of Homeland Security in the United States on February 7th. I would highly recommend you go read Darren Beatty's article about this at Revolver News. He does a very good job of analyzing it. But look at what they've said. So there's a terrorism threat, and I've talked about this, that this is part of the narrative. They're going to, anybody who opposes them is a terrorist. Look at what this says. Summary of the terrorism threat. The United States remains in a heightened threat environment fueled by several factors, including an online environment filled with false or misleading narratives and conspiracy theories and other forms of mis, dis, and malinformation, introduced and are amplified by foreign and domestic actor threats. These threat actors seek to exacerbate societal friction to sow discord and undermine public trust in government institutions to encourage unrest. So listen, the narrative is if you don't support us, you are a terrorist. You are going to be on a list. So when I titled this Making a List, this is why I titled it this. While the conditions underlying the heightened threat landscape have not significantly changed over the last year. Oh, so things haven't changed. Well, things have changed. The border has completely fallen apart in the United States, and particularly the southern border. The convergence of the following factors has increased the volatility, unpredictability, and complexity of the threat environment. First one that they mention, the proliferation of false or misleading narratives which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. Boy, go tell that to the people who were the founding fathers. So they have this phrase here, see this, other forms of dis, and malinformation. This comes from another government agency, the Election Infrastructure Government Coordinating Council and Subsector Coordinating Council's Joint Disinformation Working Group. And again, this document talks about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and it says, the risk of this misinformation, and they have advised people in these different groups, particularly election officials, set up rumor control pages to properly dispel MDM narratives and articulate facts. So what do they want to do? They want to control the narrative. You can't, if you oppose them in any way, I just think this is, on a civil liberties thing, I think this is way down the road. That this is our government that would be doing this. And so we know that this is what's going on. And we know that there's a coming global world leader who will ramp it up even more. So I think that's the takeaway. Back to the bulletin on terrorism, the primary the convergence of violent extremist ideologies, false or misleading narratives, and conspiracy theories have and will continue to contribute to a heightened threat of violence in the United States. Now, I see violence, but it's not people who oppose government mandates to deal with Charlie Vector 019er. And by the way, the narratives on that are changing. Governors are completely changing how they've dealt with this. They've done a 180-degree pivot. Are they people who are now that fall under this because they differ from the narrative of the people at the CDC? So look at this. Key factors contributing to the current heightened threat environment include the proliferation of false or misleading narratives, which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. And then they say this, widespread online proliferation of false or misleading narratives regarding unsubstantiated widespread election fraud and Charlie Vector 019er. Grievances associated with these themes inspired violent extremist attacks during 2021. I think they're referring to a year ago, January. I'm not aware of anything that's happened since. So this is the narrative. Now look, the trucker thing in Canada. So you need to be aware, and I'm sure most of you are, that this narrative though is a controlling thing. They're making lists of people to follow them. And so now we have this protest in Canada. They've been blocking some of the border crossings. The Canadian-U.S. border is probably the most active trade border in the world. It's probably going to lead to shortages. They're already talking about here in the Detroit News that there could be layoffs in auto plants because of the back and forth nature of auto parts from made in the U.S. to Canada or vice versa to assemble automobiles. So that's going to do that. And there's a lot of concern about this is from the Financial Post the other day, the age of disruption, how our supply chain broke. Canada's food pipeline is shattered, and experts say we may have to live with shortages for years. This is something you're starting to see it. Here's an example. This is a bin of fertilizer at a farm. A year ago, this cost $18,000. Today, it costs $40,000. So that's over double. So we see these prices, and it's going to affect the price of food. It has to. And some farmers are going to go without. That'll reduce crop yield, which affects food supply. I think we're in a situation where you need to prepare, but you need to understand that in terms of prophecy, it talks about a global government. It talks about a very controlling global government. But there are other things the Bible prophecy talks about: famine, food shortage, wars, rumors of wars, and we see all of these things happening. So this is part one of the midweek updates I'm going to do. I'm going to try to do one this evening or tomorrow morning on on Russia and Ukraine, and then also one about some security things related to Israel. And then we'll talk about some of these things in a little bit more depth on Sunday. But thanks for listening, and I hope you can catch part two.